He saw her at dusk, standing still by the road-soaked dress clinging to her legs, a burlap sack tied over her head, hands bound, feet bleeding. She didn't cry, didn't run. She simply whispered, "Please, take it off." Cole Travis had seen wounded animals, desperate men, dying soldiers, but never this, a girl abandoned like trash. Punished not for what she did, but for refusing to smile. He didn't ask questions. He just loosened the rope. What began as a silent rescue would unravel into something deeper, a story of pain, of survival, and a woman who would never be owned again. And that's when his fingers calloused from work and war reached for the knot behind her head, and everything he thought he understood about cruelty and kindness changed. But before that moment, before the knot slipped and the sack fell, we need to go back to the start of the week, to the first time the girl's name was erased. Cole Travis didn't go to town unless he had to. Most days he preferred the sound of fences creaking and cattle grunting over talk of border skirmishes or eastbound trains. His ranch sat 6 mi out of Dust Hollow, a patch of hard-earned land he kept alone after his brother's passing and his father's slow decline. He wasn't bitter, just tired. He fed his horses before himself, repaired what broke with quiet hands, and kept a single photograph tucked beneath his mattress. A woman he almost married before the fever took her. That was Cole's world. Dirt, sweat, memory, and silence. But that Tuesday he rode into town for nails and salt. Didn't plan to stay long. Didn't want to get pulled into anything. And yet by the time his boots hit the saloon's wooden planks, the shouting had already begun. "You can't just leave her there," a woman's voice snapped. "She's not our problem anymore," came a gruff reply. Cole paused. Inside near the corner, Miss Delilah, the widow who ran the boarding house, stood with her arms crossed, trembling. "She was sold like an animal," she said. And when the buyer saw her face, he left her in the dust with nothing but a warning. "What warning?" Cole asked quietly. Delilah turned, startled. "The kind that makes a girl cover herself in shame," she said. "They tied a sack on her, told her she'd curse any man who looked upon her." Cole frowned. "Where is she?" Delilah hesitated. "Then South Road 3, me past the split, just standing there." Cole didn't ask more. He just nodded once, then left his sack of nails behind and rode out into the dying light. She didn't move when she saw the horse didn't lift her head. The sack made sure of that. Her dress, a pale, thin thing, clung to her legs, from sweat or river water or both. Cole dismounted slowly, boots sinking into dry dirt. "You all right?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "Nothing, just breath." He stepped closer. "I don't mean you harm." Still nothing. Then, like her throat hadn't worked in days. "They said if I took it off, someone would strike me." Cole's jaw clenched. "Who said that?" She flinched at the anger in his voice. "Please," she whispered, "take them off." He reached forward slowly and steady found the knot behind her neck. It had been cinched with something crude, coarse rope or a twisted belt. He worked it loose, thread by thread, and then gently he lifted the sack away. She winced at the air as if it burned. And when her face emerged, freckled, bruised near the jaw, one lip split, he froze. Because she wasn't hideous. She wasn't cursed. She was terrified and young. Too young to be standing alone in the dark like that. Too hurt to have survived what she clearly had. Her eyes, wide unsure, met his, and she braced herself as if waiting for the blow. It never came. Cole swallowed hard. "You want to come inside?" he asked. She blinked. "I don't need pity." "You don't have pity," he said. "You've got blood on your foot." She looked down, didn't answer. He held out his hand. She didn't take it, but she followed. Back at the ranch, Cole didn't ask questions. He just handed her clean water, a boiled potato, and an old shirt she could wrap around her shoulders. She sat near the hearth, legs curled beneath her hands, shaking so badly she spilled the first sip. He didn't comment, didn't touch her, just waited. After 20 minutes, she finally spoke. "They gave me to him," she whispered. "The man who bid highest, but he didn't want me after." Cole didn't look up. "Because of your face," she hesitated. "No, because I didn't speak, and now they said I was a curse, that I'd bring ruin if a man looked too long." Cole exhaled through his nose. "That's not how curses work." She managed the hint of a smile, then said, "My name is June." He nodded. "I'm Cole." She held her hands close to her chest like they still act from the ropes. And then after a silence that felt bigger than the room, she said, I don't want to curse you. You won't, he replied. But you already changed something. What Cole looked at the sack folded neatly by the hearth. The silence. The next morning the wind changed. Not with storm or scent, but with something quieter. The kind of shift only a man who lived alone could feel. It moved like unease through the trees, through the dust. Through the way Cole found himself watching the edge of the fence line, while June washed her bruised hands in a basin of warm rainwater. She hadn't asked to stay, but she hadn't asked to leave either. And Cole wasn't the kind to push a girl back into the cold because the world had treated her worse than an animal. She still flinched if he moved too fast, still pulled her sleeves low, like hiding the rope burns would make her feel less real. But she was eating now, and that alone felt like something sacred in town. The rumors had grown teeth. A girl in a sack, a rancher alone with her. Some said she was Comanche. Some said she was cursed. Some said Cole had finally cracked like his father before him. But Cole didn't care much for town talk. He had fences to mend and horses to feed. And now a girl in his spare room who stirred at night like someone still trapped in a dream she didn't ask for. That afternoon he came back from the pasture to find her holding his mother's old Bible. She wasn't reading it, just holding it the way someone might hold a warm brick to their chest in winter. It belonged to her, she asked. He nodded. She believed in hell. She believed in mercy. June ran her fingers along the cracked leather. I never learned to read. Cole didn't answer, just poured her a mug of water and sat on the porch steps beside her. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was shared like two people listening for the same distant sound neither could name. That evening, he lit the lantern slower than usual. Jun sat by the fire, hair damp from washing, wearing one of his shirts rolled at the sleeves. She looked small but not broken. Not anymore. Do you want to tell me what happened? He asked gently. Jun looked at the flames, then nodded. They took us from the rail station in Galveston. Me and 4 others. Promised work, food, maybe marriage. She swallowed hard. They lined us up like cattle. One of them asked me to smile. I didn't, so he tied the sack over my head, said if I wouldn't look pretty, I wouldn't look at all. Cole's jaw flexed. They bid anyway. She nodded. They said I'd be quiet, obedient. Good for night work. That's what he said. The man who bought me. Did he hurt you? She hesitated, then shook her head. He took one look when the sack came off, called me a devil, and kicked me off his wagon, left me with a rope and that same sack. She looked up at Cole. I thought he'd kill me. I wanted him to, but he didn't even think I was worth the bullet. The wind picked up outside. Cole stirred the fire, the iron poker scraping like a blade across memory. I was in the war, he said, eyes still on the coals. Saw worse than bullets. Saw men turn into ghosts long before they fell. Jun didn't reply, but she listened. That's what they did to you, he said quietly. Tried to turn you into a ghost. She looked down at her hands. They almost did. Cole leaned back. But you're still here. In the morning, the dog barked twice. Not at a coyote, at something closer. Cole stepped onto the porch and saw dust rising from the south road. 2 riders, both armed, moving too slow to be travelers, too direct to be lost. He set his jaw, turned to June. Stay inside. Don't open the door. She nodded, eyes wide. Cole grabbed the shotgun from above the hearth and stood in the doorway, silent. The riders stopped 50 ft from the house. One leaned forward. Looking for a girl, he said. Red hair. Where's a sack? Last I heard, Cole didn't blink. Don't know anyone like that. The man grinned. Bet she came limping down this way. Pale little slip of a thing. Pretty underneath, they say. Cole raised the barrel slightly. You lost. The second rider nudged his horse. We ain't here for a fight, friend. Just want what's ours. She ain't yours. The first man tilted his head. She's bought property. Not anymore. The men exchanged a glance, then turned their horses without another word and rode off, slow but not gone, just circling like buzzards. Cole watched them disappear down the ridge, then shut the door. Inside, June sat with her knees pulled to her chest, the sack folded on the table beside her like a skin she'd shed, but still feared would crawl back. They'll come back, she whispered. Maybe, Cole said, but next time they won't be leaving standing. That night, Cole sat up with the shotgun across his knees, eyes fixed on the firelight flickering against the log walls. June stayed curled beneath a quilt in the corner, her breathing steady, her body still but her fingers. They held tight to the hawk feather she'd found weeks ago drifting on the fence post the morning after the sack was taken off. To her, it meant something. Freedom, maybe flight, or just proof that someone somewhere had seen her and not looked away. The men came back on the third night, but this time there were four. No lanterns, no voices, just hoof beatots, slow and heavy, muffled by damp earth and cowardice. Cole heard them before they reached the house. The way a rancher hears things when his life depends on it. The breathing of the horses, the clink of saddle irons, the pause just outside the gate. He stepped out before they knocked, shotgun at his side. A single oil lamp lit the porch, casting long shadows across his boots. "You weren't invited back," he said calmly. The lead man, same one who'd smiled last time, dismounted, lean, ugly, with eyes that didn't blink enough. His name, Cole remembered now, was Grant Teller, known for gambling, drinking, and disappearing girls near border towns. Grant spat into the dirt. "She belongs to the man who paid," he said. "You hiding her, that makes you a thief." Cole didn't flinch. "She's not property." Grant stepped forward. "She's a curse." Inside the cabin, June stood with her hand gripping the edge of the table. She heard every word. Her breath came shallow. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She remembered how they'd looked at her, like something shameful, something not quite human. But she wasn't under a sack anymore. And she wasn't alone. "I should shoot you where you stand," Cole said, voice low. "But you won't," Grant replied. "You're a good man." Good men hesitate. That was the moment June opened the door, barefoot, wrapped in Cole's old quilt. No sack on her head, no shame in her eyes, only a whisper. "Why are you afraid of me?" The other three men turned. Even Grant hesitated. June stepped into the porch, light bruises fading, but visible hair loose around her shoulders. "You beat me. You sold me. You tied me up and said I'd bring ruin." She stepped closer to Grant. "But you're the one trembling." He backed up half a step before catching himself. Cole raised the shotgun again. "You'll ride out now," he said. "And if I see you near this ranch again, I'll bury what's left of you on the hill." Grant's mouth worked, but said nothing. He turned, mounted, and they left. No fight, no words, just retreat. When the dust settled, June didn't speak for a long time. She sat on the edge of the porch, hands trembling only after they were gone. Cole poured her a mug of water and sat beside her. "You didn't have to come out," he said. "I did," she whispered. "I needed them to see my face." He looked at her, really looked, and saw not a victim, but someone climbing out of a grave someone else had dug for her. The town heard about it, of course. Dry Creek always did. Some said Cole had gone mad, pointing guns at honest men. Others said the girl had bewitched him. But the sheriff came by 2 days later with a flask and a silent nod. "You did right," he said. "They won't try again." Cole didn't ask how he knew. Didn't need to. Some men like Grant only understood fear, and now they'd felt it from someone they'd never expected. A girl they'd called cursed who stood straighter than all of them combined. By the next week, June was walking the fence line in the early light, checking for breaks, helping Cole move the feed barrels. She didn't speak much, but she didn't flinch either. She laughed once, soft, like it surprised her. When a chicken tried to peck her boot, she stopped wearing the quilt. Started wearing Cole's mother's old boots, 2 sizes too big, but worn with pride. And once, just once, Cole caught her staring at her own reflection in the water barrel. Not with hate, but with recognition. One evening, rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady. Cole stood on the porch watching the field soak the land drink. June came beside him, arms folded, eyes up. She turned to him. "I used to pray someone would find me," she said, "but not to save me, just to see me." He didn't answer. She leaned her head against his arm gently. "They always said my face would drive men mad." "It will," he replied quietly, "because it makes them reckon with what they did." She looked up. "What do you see?" Cole turned to her. "I see a girl standing where she wasn't supposed to survive." June swallowed, then asked the only thing that mattered anymore. "Am I still a ghost?" "No," Cole said. "You're the reason I stopped living like one." Thunder rolled far off, and for the first time in months, the land didn't feel like it was holding its breath. It exhaled. So did she. The first time June let the river touch her scars. She didn't flinch. Cole watched from the other bank, pretending to be occupied with mending a fence post, but his hands barely moved. She stood knee-deep in the water, her reflection scattered by the current. Her arms were bare. Rope burns faded to pale ridges. Her jaw, once swollen from fists, had softened. She tilted her face upward, letting sunlight warm the skin that had been hidden for so long. There was something holy in the way she stood, like the river had made space just for her, like the wind had stopped blowing just to listen. She cupped water in her hands and poured it over her shoulders, her ribs the place on her neck where the sack had once choked off her breath. And then she looked up across the stream directly at Cole. "I want to stay." He didn't respond right away, not because he was unsure, but because sometimes you wait to answer a prayer out loud, even when it's already been granted. That night she cooked, nothing fancy. Beans, a bit of pork corn warmed in the skillet, but the gesture meant more than a feast. She moved around the cabin like she belonged to the space, like the floor knew her steps now, and the hearth didn't burn unless she was near it. Cole sat at the table watching the flames flicker against her cheek. She caught him staring. "What?" she asked, a little smile teasing her lips. "You're not the same girl who walked up to my fence with a sack on her head." She looked down quiet. "Then I'm still her. I just don't carry the sack anymore." He nodded once. "That's good." "I think," she paused, chewing her bottom lip. "I think I want to make a life here, not just hide." Cole's hands tensed slightly around his mug. "You mean stay?" She nodded. "Help work. Earn my place. You already have." June blinked. "I have." Cole stood up, walked over to the hearth, and reached into the small drawer built into the wall. He pulled out something wrapped in cloth, laid it gently in front of her. She unfolded it slowly. A pair of leather gloves stitched by hand, worn but strong. His mother's. "I think she'd want you to have them." Cole said this land, she always said it belonged to the ones who could tend it, not the ones who bought it. June said nothing for a long moment. Then she placed her hands inside them and they fit. Not perfectly, but closely enough. By spring, people started talking again, but differently now. The shopkeeper called June Miss. Instead of girl, the preacher's wife invited her to Sunday supper, though Cole politely declined. And once an older ranch hand passing through stopped at the gate and tipped his hat. "You made it out," he said softly. June smiled back. "Still making it." He nodded, then rode on. One evening, a wagon came up the trail. June tensed when she saw it. Cole stepped onto the porch, shotgun resting quietly against the wall. But there was no danger, just a woman, thin-tired, her dress faded, with a child in her lap. The woman's eyes met June's like she already knew her. "I heard you might be here," she said. "I was with you back in Galveston before they split us." Yun's breath caught. The child in the woman's lap looked barely 4. "They told me you were taken," the woman whispered. "That they tried," June said gently. "But someone stopped them." The woman hesitated. "I don't have a place." He left. "I got no money, no safe road." June looked at Cole. He didn't speak, just opened the barn door and pointed to the hoft. "There's room." The woman began to cry. Not loudly, not broken, just soft. Like someone who finally let go of fear after years of clenching it tight. June helped her down, held the child in her arms, and carried her inside. That night, as the stars stretched across the black sky, Cole poured June a cup of coffee. She wrapped her hands around it, fingers still in those old leather gloves. "I didn't know if I was allowed to matter," she said. "You don't need permission," Cole replied. She looked at him, as clear now. Not defiant, just whole. "You think a person can be born twice. I think some are born once and buried early. But not all graves have dirt." Jun smiled at that, then leaned her head against his shoulder. Not seeking rescue, not asking for belonging, just resting like someone who finally knew she wasn't going to be erased. In the morning, she pulled the old sack from the drawer where she tucked it away, stepped outside, hung it from the fence post at the edge of the pasture, like a flag, let the wind take it, watched it flutter, then fall. She didn't pick it up, didn't need to. It wasn't hers anymore. Years passed quiet on the Travis ranch. Fences held soil, stayed kind. The porch creaked in summer and whistled in winter. And inside the small cabin that once held only grief and firewood, a different life began to take root. June no longer walked like a ghost. She walked like the land belonged to her bones. She moved through the fields at sunrise with a soft authority. Not loud, not sharp, just sure. She could saddle a horse in under 2 minutes, drive a wagon straight through rain. And when something spooked the cattle, it was her voice that calmed them first. People in town stopped whispering. They started waving. And though she never told anyone what the sack had felt like, over her face never described the heat, the panic, the stink of old grain, and rope she didn't have to. She had buried it right at the edge of the garden beneath the cotton tree. No marker, no words, just gone. The woman who'd arrived months before the one with the small daughter and the cracked shoes stayed too. Her name was Liddy, her girl Ruth. They took the south room and turned it into a sewing space. Liddy stitched quilts out of old shirts and leftover canvas. Ruth helped gather herbs and sorted nails into jars. There was laughter again, the kind that doesn't feel borrowed, the kind that doesn't ask permission. One day June found a hawk feather near the barn door. Same as that first morning, back when she still trembled at creaking wood and sudden wind. She picked it up gently and smiled, not because it was a sign, but because it reminded her that everything, even wings, begin in silence. It was Cole who asked first. No ring, no kneeling, just one soft sentence, while they watched Ruth splash in the creek. You ever think about staying forever? June didn't answer right away. She was plaiting her hair, fingers moving slow. I've thought about a lot of things, she said. He nodded, waited. She looked up. I want a name. Not one they gave me. Not one I had before. Cole tilted his head. What name? Joan shrugged. Something new. Something mine. He didn't laugh. Didn't push. He just touched the side of her face. The same cheek that had once been bruised so deeply it purpled her temple. I'll call you what you ask me to, he said. Always, she kissed him that night. Not out of desperation, not out of debt, but because he'd seen her face when it was still covered and believed it held light. That winter they married. No papers, no preacher, just Liddy sewing a blue ribbon onto a white linen dress. Just Ruth scattering cedar branches along the porch rail. Just Cole standing in his best shirt, eyes shining but quiet, while June stepped into the dusk and took his hand. I never thought I'd be anything more than the girl in the sack, she whispered. You were always more, he said. You just forgot for a while. They kissed as the fire crackled, and no one called it a wedding, but everyone knew it was. The land gave back after that. 2 good seasons of rain, 3 healthy calves, and a small cradle carved from cedar placed near the hearth one spring morning. Empty at first, then full of life a few months later. A daughter Cole wanted to name her Hope. June wanted something stronger, so they settled on Mercy because she wasn't born from pity or chance or luck. She was born because someone said, take them off, and someone else listened. Years later, when June stood at the fence line, watching the sun dip behind the canyon, Ruth beside her and Mercy on her hip, she said something she hadn't said in a long time. I used to be afraid of my face. Ruth looked up puzzled. Why? June smiled. Because someone told me it would ruin men. Ruth shook her head. That's dumb. Very. Did it? June looked out across the field, where Cole was brushing down a horse sleeves, rolled humming, something no one else knew the words to. She smiled again. No, but it did change one. When she died old, full of years, wrapped in the same leather gloves Cole gave her decades ago. They buried her under the cotton tree beside the garden. No preacher, no crowd, just 3 women, and a man who once said nothing louder than grief. They buried her with a feather in her hand and no sack in sight. And on her stone carved by Ruth herself were only 5 words. She took it off forever, and far away in places where girls still trembled beneath burlap and silence. They whispered stories of a woman who wore no curse, who walked straight through shame, and who made her own name. A name strong enough to carry others. A name born the moment someone said, please take them off. And someone finally did. Coincidental.